Number 10. Immortal jellyfish. The immortal jellyfish is a species of small, biologically immortal jellyfish found worldwide in tropical waters. Given the nickname immortal jellyfish for its ability to revert back to a polyp stage while it's starving or in danger and basically escaping death, researchers believe this jellyfish may hold the cure to cancer. Under normal conditions, its life cycle is divided into 4 parts. The union of the male and female gametes produces a larva or planula. It then attaches to the seabed as a polyp, similar to an anemone. The polyps then release ephora, or a young jellyfish, into the phase prior to sexual maturity. They become jellyfish, reproduce sexually, and start over. But if they are stressed by an environmental threat, the jellyfish revert. After reproducing, they return to the previous phases, becoming polyps in the ocean floor again. As far as scientists know, jellyfish can repeat the process indefinitely. Thus, they are said to be biologically immortal. They can be eaten by a predator or fall into the hands of a swimmer, but they do not die of old age, which is pretty cool. Number 9. River at the bottom of the Black Sea. The Black Sea is one of the most isolated from the world's oceans, and there is a river flowing along the bottom of it. Now, it's just not a normal river. Oh no, it's complete with trees, leaves, and even waterfalls. One major difference is that the underwater river, when rounding a bend, moves in currents spinning the opposite direction from those on land. It has been an intriguing aspect of the ocean since it was found. According to scientists, if the river was on land, it would be the 6th largest river in the world in terms of the volume of water flowing through it. The discovery of the river, announced on August 1st, 2010, was made by scientists at the University of Leeds, and it is the first of its kind in the world. Number 8. The Mariana Trench. In the western Pacific Ocean, you will find the deepest part of the sea. The Mariana Trench is deeper than the height of Mount Everest, 43 miles wide, and a massive 1,580 miles long, which is 5 times longer than the Grand Canyon. A certified U.S. national monument, only small areas of the Mariana Trench have been explored. James Cameron reached the bottom in a submersible vessel Deep Sea Challenger in 2012, with the last successful attempt to search the ocean floor coming in 2020, when the Chinese submersible Fenduji made it all the way down. Several new species of underwater creatures have been discovered in the Mariana Trench, with most living on the surface of the ocean floor, including a type of sea cucumber. Explorers will find themselves in total darkness as they continue to understand what else lies in the deepest parts of the ocean and how marine life manages to survive. Number 7. Los Mahabalipuram Pagodas. The Lost Pagodas was long considered a myth by many because of the lack of scientific evidence of its existence. But in 2004, when the infamous Indian Ocean tsunami hit, for a brief moment when the waters parted, large rock-like structures emerged from the water and were witnessed by many onlookers. The Los Mahabalipuram Pagodas in India, making it an incredible discovery. The remains of an ancient city were found in 2001 off the coast of India. Scientists retrieved many different items from the large city, including artwork, hand tools, fossilized bones, and pottery shards. What makes the discovery incredible is that the city is thought to be around 9,000 years old, which predates to the earliest Indian civilizations that sprung up 4,000 years ago. There is still not a lot known about this ancient city, as scientists and archaeologists continue to search the area for more clues and debate how old the city really is and who once inhabited it. But wow. Number 6. The 2,400-year-old boat in the Black Sea. Archaeologists working with engineers from the Black Sea Maritime Archaeology Project, aka MAP, have discovered a 23-meter shipwreck that has laid undisturbed for more than 2,400 years. The find is believed to be the oldest intact shipwreck ever discovered. Thanks to the lack of oxygen in the Black Sea and the fact it was discovered a mile below the surface means it is exceptionally well preserved. The 75-foot vessel is thought to be ancient Greek. It still has its mast, rudders, and rowing benches. Speaking to The Guardian, Professor John Adams, the principal investigator with MAP, explained, "A ship surviving intact from the classical world, lying in over 2 kilometers of water, is something I would have never believed possible, and that it will change our understanding of shipbuilding and seafaring in the ancient world." The ship is thought to be a trading vessel. However, up to now, the design has only been seen on the size of ancient Greek pottery. The find is an archaeological first. The team have left the vessel untouched, apart from a small sample that was used to carbon date it by the University of Southampton. Number 5. $150 million of lost silver. At the bottom of the Atlantic for more than a century, a 150-year-old steamship had been found in 2003. The ship is the Republic, which sailed from New York in 1865, just after the Civil War, carrying 59 passengers and crew and mixed cargo meant to help New Orleans recover from the war. About 100 miles off Georgia, battling a hurricane, it sank in waters a third of a mile deep. Its cargo of lost coins, experts say, may now be up to worth $150 million. That would make it one of history's richest treasure wrecks. It's a dream come true, said Dr. Donald H. Kagan, an expert on 19th century coins who is advising the company that discovered the wreck. There are piles of coins. The company Odyssey Marine Exploration of Tampa, Florida, who announced the find, said it hoped to retrieve all the coins. The company has retrieved more than 1,600 gold and silver coins, and none are dated later than 1865, tending to confirm the wreck's identity, said George Stem, the company's director of operations. For some reason, even the silver coins are in great condition. Part of it is surely the physical environment down there, he said. The icy deep explorers are still finding can often preserve objects, even precious metals like silver, that normally corrode easily. It's like finding a real treasure, and I would definitely like to receive some of those special coins. Number 4. Giant squid. The Kraken is a legendary sea monster of enormous size that is said to appear off the coast of Norway. Now, this is a mythical creature, but there is some truth to it. A giant squid was found on shore in Denmark in 1853. The giant squid is as elusive as the legend it inspired. It lives so deep underwater that we have limited information about it. However, we know it has the largest eyes of all living creatures, grows up to 18 meters, and is frequently hunted by sperm whales for food. The weaker giant squid generally flees when confronted by a whale, however, it sometimes fights back when cornered, and it's not unusual to find sperm whales with scars left from their battles with giant squids. It wasn't until the turn of the century in 2001 that humans saw the giant squid for the first time, and only a few years after that when it was finally photographed, making it one of the most elusive on the planet. The giant squid has long been known to exist, but capturing it on film has taken scientists extensive time and voyages to the deepest parts of the ocean where life is difficult to sustain. Number 3. Elongated skulls. Shockwaves is a cenote located in Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. It is a place that locals feared, and in 2012 a team of divers discovered the reason behind its fearsome reputation. An underwater survey discovered 2 chambers of the cenote littered with human bones, including deformed skulls. Archaeologists spent 2 weeks exploring the 2 chambers. The skulls belong to different sexes and ages, so they aren't thought to be sacrifices, which begs the question, why are they buried deep underwater? Archaeologist Bradley Russell, who made the discovery, believes the dead may have been buried as some form of ritual, or that they could be the victims of a plague that swept through the area. You wouldn't want them near the rest of the population, and you wouldn't want to drink the water either, Russell explained. Regardless, that's creepy. And why are the skulls elongated? Are they another species of human? I have so many questions. Number 2. Baltic Sea Anomaly. In 2011, a sonar image was taken by Peter Lindberg, Dennis Erberg, and their Swedish Ocean X diving team while searching for treasures on the ocean floor in the Baltic Sea. What the picture showed was a seemingly non-natural 200-foot circular object with passageways and stairs. The discovery looked like something out of a Star Wars film, and many people believed it was a spaceship that sank to the bottom of the ocean. Samples taken from the area in 2012 were given to Swedish scientists who said that there was nothing extraterrestrial about the area, but I'm not too sure about that. What Ocean X and the crew had found was weird, and many still think there is a UFO lying at the bottom of the Baltic Sea, and there's another expedition to the area planned soon. And coming in at number 1 is giant underwater pyramids. Off the coast of Portugal in the Atlantic Ocean is an anomaly that experts have been unable to fully understand or explain. Picked up by oceanic GPS technology, measurements of a structure were found, leading researchers to believe that 2 giant pyramids of ancient times sit underwater thousands of feet below the surface. The GPS data received back has the structures with a base of 8,000 square feet and about 150 feet tall, making these pyramids pretty giant in size. But there's very very little explanation into their existence, leaving it entirely up to speculation. Why would they be there? Is it another hidden city? Who knows? The pyramid has been underwater for about 20,000 years. Considering this is around the time of the last ice age, where glaciation was melting from its peak 2,000 years prior, whatever civilization, human or not, that was around before the ice age could be responsible for building the pyramid. While the Portuguese Navy still hasn't determined the origins, many might question why this hasn't been first reported sooner than late 2012. To further support the idea that this pyramid could have been built by different civilizations, archaeologists from the Portuguese Association of Archaeological Research have recently discovered evidence on Pico Island that suggests their belief that humans existed in the Azores region before the arrival of the Portuguese thousands of years ago. Spooky.
Starting off this countdown, we have the head transplant. So scientists have discovered a way to transfer a head from one body to another. I know, it's crazy. Let me explain. So Italian surgeon Sergio Canavero managed to attach a smaller rat to a larger rat and still kept the rat alive. The rat was still fully functioning. He also claimed to have successfully done this with dogs, and in 2016 he did this on a monkey. Apparently he does this by attaching the spinal cords together, and now he's looking for real-life people to be a part of his experiment. He wants to be able to do this on humans. Maybe that's why Walt Disney had his head frozen for so many years. He's waiting to be attached to another, younger body. Just kidding. But seriously, this is terrifying. In our 9th spot, we have the alien DNA. And if you guys are liking this video so far, make sure to give it a big thumbs up and make sure you stick around right to the end of the video because I am shouting out your weird comments. In 2014, it was discovered that DNA can survive re-entry from space. Basically, Swiss and German scientists put DNA on the exterior of a rocket. The rocket then did a trip around space and back to Earth. And they found that the DNA on the rocket survived. Meaning, if there is life out there and they sent a message to Earth, their alien DNA would successfully survive on Earth. This has scared a lot of people because they think an alien invasion is now possible, which is pretty creepy, not gonna lie. Also, that means intergalactic bacteria and disease can also survive its trip to Earth, which can threaten humanity. Isn't that great? Moving on to number 8, we have the deadly snails. So, snails are slow, tiny creatures that no one really fears, but maybe we should. Apparently, snails are one of the most deadly animals in the world. Why? Well, freshwater snails kill up to 20,000 people a year. People die after drinking water contaminated with snail eggs. If you do this, then you develop a condition called schistosomiasis. And guess what? These snails can live 3 to 10 years in a host's body. In some cases, they have lived 40 years inside of a person, which is disgusting, and I never want to swim in a lake ever again. Just kidding, but seriously, add snails to the list of things that I'm afraid of. In our 7th spot, we have the viruses. The advancements we have made in medicine is quite fascinating. Over the years, millions of lives have been saved as a result. But I got some bad news. Some microbes are evolving so fast that scientists can't find a way to fight them. On top of that, viruses are mutating constantly. They keep having to find new antibiotics and vaccines to defeat them. In fact, some strains of bacteria are becoming drug resistant. It's quite a scary time right now. I mean, we are witnessing this all firsthand. In our 6th spot, we have the zombie invasion. Over the years, the fear of a zombie outbreak has been on the rise. We can thank The Walking Dead and other shows for that. But in all seriousness, zombies can become a thing. According to scientists, there could be a cordyceps out there that could cause this to happen. Cordyceps is a type of parasitic fungi that attacks a host and then takes over the host. Usually we see this happen to insects, but scientists say it could happen to humans too. Dun dun dun! If it does happen, then it would turn us into brain-dead zombies. But they did say the chances of this happening are 1 out of a million though. Still, the fact they say it might happen is terrifying, okay? There could be zombies. Scientists said it. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with the multiple Earths. In 2014, NASA discovered several interesting planets. One of them is named Kepler 452b. Don't know who named that, but they should be fired. It is a planet that closely resembles Earth. In fact, it's the most Earth-like planet outside of our solar system. In fact, NASA estimates that there are 1 billion Earth-like planets in the Milky Way alone, meaning there has to be life on those planets. Scary fact is, the life on those planets might be way more advanced than us. They just know that there has to be other intelligent life forms out there somewhere, which is cool, but also very daunting. Like, they could take over Earth if they really wanted to. Moving on to number 4, we have the caterpillar zombie virus. This is a pretty scary virus that targets caterpillars. I'm glad it can't transfer over to humans, and you'll understand why. Basically, caterpillars that have this virus will eat until they get so fat. They just keep eating until their body can't take it anymore, and they literally explode. When they explode, they spray guts everywhere. And any caterpillars that get sprayed will then contract this virus as well. So they literally eat themselves to death until they burst. Imagine if humans got this. Like, you're walking down the street and next thing you know, someone explodes on you. That's disgusting. Moving on to number 3, we have the junk food. In 1948, researchers discovered just how bad junk food really is for you. In a study with over 5,000 residents, they were looking at the risk factors for heart disease. That's when they found people that ate good tasting food like fries, ice cream, brownies, chips, you get it. They were more prone for heart disease as well as diabetes and stroke. The researchers discovered just how disturbing the effects junk food and fast food have on the body. Which is sad, because I just want to eat chips and burgers all day and not have to worry. Moving on to number 2, we have the plastics, and I'm not talking about the girls from the Mean Girls. If you know, then you know. Okay, we all know that plastics are bad for the environment and that they're polluting the earth. But in 2014, another shocking discovery was made about plastics. They discovered that BPA found in most plastic products act like synthetic estrogen. This means that constant exposure to it can lead to fertility problems, or even cause tumors in women's uteruses. Long-term exposure can also lead to breast cancer, heart attacks, and diabetes. Basically, by drinking and eating food from these plastic containers, you're ingesting these chemicals into your body. So it could be slowly killing you and you don't even know it. And in our number 1 spot, we have the parasite. If you're eating something right now, I suggest you put your food away because you're about to lose your appetite. Trust me, this next discovery is very disgusting. So basically, there was a Russian woman that discovered a small lump below her left eye. She didn't really think anything of it until the lump moved. It moved above her eye, and then next thing you know, there was a bump on her lip. That's when she reached out and got medical attention. Turns out, she had a thread-like worm living in her body. This is known as Dirofilaria repens. It typically infects dogs, cats, foxes, and other wild animals. But turns out, they can transfer to humans too. How lovely. It can be spread by mosquito bites. Then this worm will live in your tissue under your skin. Ugh, no thank you.
Coming in at number 10. How ambitious were our ancestors when it came to hunting game? Apparently very, according to paleontologists who unearthed over 200 ancient mammoth skeletons beneath an airport construction site in Mexico City. Now we know humanity has been responsible for more than one extinction already, so it's not off the table with the skeletal find. The reason as to why so many bones have been found in the same place remains to be seen, however. But scientists propose 2 potential explanations. One, they went there of their own accord to graze the grass and have some lunch, or they were chased into the mud because humans were hungry. Which one do you think is more likely? But going by the way I feel when I'm hungry, I'm definitely going with the latter. But still, who knows? Coming in at number 9, the discovery of Atlantis. Maybe? We all know the legend of Atlantis and have all dreamed about finding a lost city while snorkeling in the ocean or in our pools at home, or maybe that's just me, but scientists think that they may have found the origin of the famous legend. A group of islands in Santorini, Greece that roughly cover 120 miles could be all that's left of what was Atlantis. Plato said that the city was drowned by a massive wave, and researchers believe that it was indeed a tsunami that was triggered by the eruption of volcano Thera almost 3,500 years ago. Thera was the most powerful eruption ever witnessed, and the horror that came after it may have inspired the legend. England. Based on new evidence found on the seafloor off the coast of Caesarea, scientists now believe that this wave raced over 600 miles across Santorini. Anyone watching from afar would have witnessed the people and the architecture of the Minoan Empire dragged beneath the waves. Still, despite these discoveries, some even think that Atlantis resides in the Bahamas, or even Japan, or maybe in my pool in the backyard. I guess there's no harm in looking, so get your scuba gear ready. Next up, we have one for all the mummy fans. Coming in at number 8, we have the discovery of over 160 coffins discovered in Saqqara, Egypt this last year. The Saqqara necropolis is a burial ground in the ancient capital of Memphis that has been undergoing excavation for over 3 years. This is the first time these coffins have seen the light of day, or any other humans for that matter, in 2,500 years. One of the mummies, which was wrapped in cloth, was discovered through X-ray technology to be so well preserved that the entire inner structure was intact. Along with the mummies and sarcophagi, 40 artifacts have been found as well, including funerary masks and figurines. There is no doubt that there will be plenty more to reveal in the coming year, along with plenty more questions. Coming in at number 7, we're going all the way back 5,000 years ago. If you're a fan of Outlander or just tried and true mysteries altogether, you know about Stonehenge. But for those who don't, well, I'll just tell you. Stonehenge is an ancient circular structure of megaliths dating back all the way to 2500 BCE in Salisbury, Wiltshire, England. 92 stones, all ranging in size, make up the structure, but no one knows who built it for sure and where they come from. The smaller stones in the center, called blue stones, have been traced back to Wales, but up until last July, no one had any idea where the Silcrete Sarsen stones traced to. But according to an article published in July 2020, scientists now believe that these stones hail from Westwood, Wiltshire, around 25 kilometers north of the site. But the question still remains, how did they get to Salisbury? The Sarsen megaliths weigh individually around 50,000 pounds and somehow ended up 25 kilometers south of where they came from. Someone had to drag them there, but the question of who and how still remains. Now it's time to look to the sky. There are plenty of mysteries in the great beyond and scientists can't get enough of them. If you've ever watched a science fiction show or TV show, then you're familiar with black holes as pretty effective plot devices. Coming in at number 6, we have the discovery of a new type of black hole, one based on a theory Einstein predicted 100 years ago. In 2020, researchers at Laser Interferometer Gravitational Wave Observatory, aka LIGO, announced that they had yet again discovered ripples in space-time. What? What does that mean? These ripples are called gravitational waves, which are a result of two massive objects colliding in space, i.e. black holes or neutron stars. The last recorded similar disturbance was in 2019, a result of two neutron stars, which are dense remnants of dead stars, colliding. But this time, they didn't find any sign of collision, which means that the theory of two neutron stars colliding and immediately forming a black hole can in fact happen. Einstein predicted this a century ago, though he never thought that we would be able to measure gravitational waves. Scientists still want to wait and accumulate more examples of the phenomenon before officially classifying it as a new kind of black hole, but still, it definitely makes you wonder what other predictions have been made that are waiting out there to be discovered. Which brings me to number 5, the search for signs of life continues as scientists discover a substance produced by anaerobic microbes on Earth in Venus's atmosphere. Phosphine is often produced by volcanoes or lightning strikes, but with the amount they found in the atmosphere, it had to be made by something else. Anaerobic microbes also produce phosphine here on Earth, which gives scientists the idea that there could be some kind of life just next door. After more tests, however, it turns out that there wasn't nearly as much in the atmosphere as initially predicted. But even with a smaller amount, there is still a chance of life on Venus. I don't know about you, but I'm really looking forward to welcoming some new neighbors. But Venus may not be the only place to find life or even to home. Coming in at number 4, the exciting new discovery of water on Ceres, the largest dwarf planet located on the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Of course, scientists don't think that Earth can be our home forever, so we're always looking for new real estate, and we may have found one. In August 2020, NASA's Dawn orbiter captured images of water seeping onto the surface of Ceres. The search for a habitable planet with water is crucial when seeking out a potential new home, so of course this got scientists super excited. It's speculated that the water comes from a saltwater reservoir located 25 miles beneath Ceres' Ocator crater. It could be hundreds of miles wide, and some scientists even speculate a reservoir the size of an ocean. Should the call arise, are you ready to pack your bags and go where few have gone before? But coming back down to our beautiful home we call Earth, we've got number 3 coming in very, very hot. We are getting closer and closer to number 1, and if you're enjoying these crazy universal finds, go ahead and click the like button and subscribe for more mysteries. This one really gets me excited, because according to a study published on January 28, 2020, we have now found the oldest recorded material on Earth to date. Scientists analyzed fragments of meteors in Australia that apparently contain stardust from 5 to 7 billion years ago. That's older than the oldest rock formations on the planet, which date to around 4.4 billion years. Why is this so exciting? Well, I'll tell you. The evidence found within these materials support a theory that the majority of the stars formed in an explosion over 7 billion years ago instead of gradually over time. It always blows my mind to think that life just exploded into existence. I mean, come on, how cool is that? So we've talked about potential new life on Venus and water on Ceres, but what about actual aliens? Are they out there? And better yet, already here? Well, among some of the weird crazy things that happened in 2020, someone may have let it spill that aliens do exist and they have been trying to contact us. Former Israeli space security chief says that aliens exist and that ex-President Trump knows about it. The former head of Israeli Defense Ministry's Space Directorate claimed that the unidentified flying objects have asked not to publish that they are here, but humanity is not ready yet. He also claims that the extraterrestrials are curious and want to understand the fabric of the universe. Ashed then goes on to say that President Trump was aware and was going to tell the world before being persuaded to keep the news to himself in order to prevent hysteria. I mean, like we didn't have enough to deal with in 2020. He also continues to say that there is an underground base in Mars which includes both American and alien representatives. This story sounds super insane and definitely too good to be true. So is it? Who knows? I guess we will find out for sure when the time is right. And last but not least, we have to end at number 1 on one of the biggest and creepiest mysteries of the universe that still have scientists baffled. Landing on number 1, let's talk about dark energy. The universe is said to be made from 5% actual matter and 25% dark matter. So what's the extra 70%? At the rate the universe is expanding, scientists think that the rest of the universe is a substance called dark energy. That sounds like a supervillain, a force with enough power to tear the universe apart. While dark matter tries to tie particles together, dark energy does the exact opposite. The idea of dark energy surfaced in 1998 when a supernova observed through the Hubble Space Telescope showed that the universe expanded at a slower pace in the past than it does today. Scientists then realized that in fact, gravity wasn't slowing down the expansion of the universe. In fact, it wasn't slowing down at all, it was accelerating, and they didn't know why or what was causing it. Einstein was the first person to realize that empty space was not nothing, and one explanation for what dark energy is the property of space. Theorists still don't quite know how to explain this, so for now they have given it the name of dark energy.
Starting us off at number 10 is the monster study. In 1939, speech pathologists at the University of Iowa set out to prove their theory that stuttering was a learned behavior that was caused by a child's anxiety towards speaking aloud. So how did they go about testing this theory? Well, for starters, all the subjects were orphans, and they told these impressionable minds that they were going to be receiving speech therapy. From there, they split the 22 orphans down the middle, providing half of the subjects with positive reinforcement and praise of their speech fluency, while the other half was belittled for making any kind of speech imperfections. Essentially, the negative half was told that they were doomed to start stuttering once they began to speak, and then told that they were stuttering even if they weren't. So just straight up mind games. Once the seed was planted, they would sit down with the orphans and insist they did not speak unless they would be able to speak right, meaning without a stutter, despite the fact that most of them never stuttered to begin with. Eventually, the orphans began shutting down, some refusing to speak entirely, all based on a false accusation. The entire experiment caused an insane amount of psychological harm to the students, and some even developed speech impediments through the sheer gaslighting of being told they had one. Coming in at number 9 is the Milgram experiment. Named after the psychologist Stanley Milgram, who spearheaded the experiment, this study began in the summer of 1961 and looked at testing the limits of obedience. Many academics at the time wanted to take a look into what was at the core of an authoritative personality, and how someone could be swayed to commit something that they didn't want to do simply because they believed they had to. Once the study began, two groups were made. One group was assigned to be actors, and the other group was tasked with shocking the person in the room after they answered a question wrong. What group 2 didn't know was that group 1 was not actually being shocked, just acting as if they were. As it turns out, an incredibly high proportion of the subjects continued to shock the group despite thinking they were hurting them, simply because they felt they had no other choice. But later, another scientist thought the experiment needed to be amped up, as he hypothesized people could have felt the victims were faking it. This new study included real-life dogs as the subjects being shocked, and test subjects apparently openly wept while still following orders to shock the dogs. I mean, first of all, why bring the sweet puppies into this? And secondly, the psychological harm that was caused by these people feeling forced to harm others is just evil. Coming in at number 8 is Kurt Blohm. One of the many evil scientists during World War II was Kurt Blohm. And just like the rest of them, he too performed indescribable acts on the prisoners in hopes to further scientific understanding. Or at least, that's what was being said at the time. His main choice of torture was purposefully injecting the prisoners with cancer and typhus. But not because they were looking on how to cure it, no, they literally were looking on how to best cause it. The reason behind that was that Blohm was in charge of all biological warfare in the SS, and so his experiments aimed to find the best way to use these diseases against their enemies, debilitating them. I mean, bio-warfare as a whole is an insane concept. Like, just imagine researching how to best infect your enemies with an incurable disease in order to win a war. It's so wild to me. But what is truly mind-blowing about the whole situation is that despite being arrested and put on the doctor's trial for his evil doings in 1947, and admitting to what he had done, the US intervened in his prosecution for wartime atrocities and got him off the hook. From there, the US Army Chemical Corps hired him to work on biological warfare projects in their country. So not only did he get away with his evil experiments, he continued on with them for another country's benefit. Coming in at number 7 is J. Marion Sims. Widely regarded as the father of modern gynecology, Dr. Sims gained most of his fame from doing experimental surgeries on slave women in the mid-1800s. He's quite a controversial character in medical history for several reasons, because while he did provide advancements like the invention of the speculum and developed new surgical techniques for dealing with the female anatomy, he also performed on unconsenting slaves without anesthesia. And not to mention, the reason he didn't use anesthesia was not because it wasn't available to him. It was because he believed that the operations were, quote, not painful enough to justify the trouble. Further, there were several of his patients who suffered extreme complications. One woman almost died from sepsis after a sponge was left inside her, and another woman was performed on a total of 30 times. Many in the medical community have condemned his work, as they feel he was manipulating the social institution of slavery to perform human experimentation, and that despite what he may have discovered, countless women were tortured in order to do so. Coming in at number 6 is Karl Klauberg. Another horrible scientist during World War II. Back in 1942, Klauberg approached Heinrich Himmler, who was a major figure in the German party at the time, and asked if he could receive a large number of women for research purposes. From there, his proposal was accepted, so off to the cruel camp he went. Once he was there, the so-called research began. I mean, truthfully, it was really more human torture under the guise of science. I'm sure you're wondering, just what was Klauberg experimenting? Well, he wanted to figure out how to sterilize women in the most cost-efficient way, so he would inject formaldehyde directly into their stomachs without any painkillers. He experimented on thousands of prisoners, but only 700 survived, although all were left sterile. Now, as I'm sure you can put together, the reason behind this forced sterilization had to do with eugenics, but on top of putting formaldehyde in the victims, he also mentally tortured his patients too. In order to make sure that the experiment had worked, he needed to inseminate them to make sure that they wouldn't conceive. But for an extra layer of cruelty, he would tell his patients that he injected them with animal sperm to try and create a monster. Coming in at number 5, the Tuskegee study. Back in 1932, the United States Public Health Service began to dive into the natural progression of syphilis if left untreated. And while that is very valuable knowledge to know about in order to prevent complications in the future, there are definitely better ways to go about it. In this study, 600 poor and illiterate men, of which only 399 previously had syphilis, were hired, and none were told about what the experiment was going to be for, or that they had a life-threatening disease to begin with. The 600 men were instead told that they were actually receiving free healthcare, meals, and burial insurance in exchange for participating. What's even more sick is that even though penicillin was proven to be an effective cure in 1947, the study continued all the way until 1972, essentially needlessly infecting hundreds of people and watching them die of a disease that already had a cure. It's just insane that this went on for so long, and it definitely is one of the most evil experiments to have seen the light of day. Coming in at number 4 is the Stanford prison experiment. Probably one of the most notorious experiments ever recorded is the 1971 Stanford experiment. In 1971, Philip Zimbardo set out to test the nature of human nature, specifically what happens when you put good people in evil situations. To do so, he set up a 2-week study and paid college students $15 a day to play guards and prisoners. The day prior to the official start, those assigned as guards were given an orientation and provided uniforms. The next day, those assigned as prisoners were mock arrested by the police, a detail that utterly blindsided participants, and taken to the jail for the study to begin. Immediately upon arrival, they were dehumanized, forced into a strip search, given an ID number, and sent to their cells. Nearly immediately, things got out of hand. By day 2, guards were harassing the inmates with psychological and physical abuse, and prisoners were attempting to rebel against their treatment, which only exacerbated the abuse, prompting the guards to strip the prisoners of their uniforms, take their mattresses, and force them to relieve themselves in buckets. On the 3rd day, alliances were being formed, offering rewards to prisoners with good behavior, and by the 4th day, full-on riots were breaking out. Things escalated so badly that the experiment ended on the 6th day, a whole week before it was scheduled to end. While incredibly controversial, the Stanford prison experiment has been the basis of psychologists and even historians' understanding of how even healthy people can become evil when placed in certain situations. Next up at number 3 is the Willowbrook experiments. In the 1950s, one institution ran a very, very dark experiment that I honestly can't quite believe was able to happen even then. The institution was for young disabled people, specifically those deemed to have a mental illness or a mental disorder at the time, and due to highly unsanitary conditions in the institution, many contracted hepatitis. You would think this would maybe make them go, maybe we should tidy up around here, protect those that are under our care. But that was not quite their approach. Instead, Dr. Sal Krugman proposed an experiment to try and develop a vaccine. Now, while I can appreciate the thought that was behind his proposition, rather than testing on the already contracted citizens, they actually began purposefully infecting people with the disease to assist in the experiment. Now, don't get it twisted, there were many folks against this from the start, but ultimately parents of the admitted people gave their permission to affect them and use them in the study, so forth they went. Kind of crazy to believe that someone would actually go along with that, but apparently they didn't seem to care too much about infecting disabled people with a deadly disease. So there you have it. Coming in at number 2 is Dr. Sigmund Rascher. As we have covered by this point, there were many evil scientists researching cruel experiments during World War II, and one of the worst doctors of the time was Dr. Sigmund Rascher. When he joined the army, he asked the leader if human subjects could be provided at his disposal, and by 1942, his wishes were granted. He began conducting experiments in pressure chambers where he would simulate a high altitude and then quickly
he alter the pressure to simulate the conditions of a pilot free falling with no oxygen. But he was most well known for his cruel freezing experiments on 300 prisoners, supposedly to figure out the best way to warm up soldiers who experienced hypothermia. He would either force his victims to remain outdoors, completely naked in freezing temperatures for up to 14 hours, or would place them in tanks of ice for 3 hours, measuring their pulse and internal temperatures all the while. From there, they would warm up their victims, experimenting with a variety of different temperatures, including boiling water, often causing further harm. Along with his other forms of torture, Sigmund would also administer polygal, a substance to aid in blood clotting, and then shoot or amputate a limb on his victim to see the speed at which they would bleed out. I mean, you have to wonder what happens to someone in their life to make them this cruel and evil. And last up today in our number 1 spot is Shiro Ishii and Unit 731. During the 30s and 40s, notorious microbiologist and surgeon Shiro Ishii led the development and application of biological warfare for the infamous Unit 731. Shiro had long awaited to develop biological warfare, something that was against the Geneva Convention at the time, so in 1936, when he was promoted to senior army surgeon and granted full control over Unit 731, Shiro Ishii unleashed all evil. With no one to tell him no, Ishii began his evil experiments on live humans, as he believed he could not get the results he was looking for by testing on animals. Ishii was notorious for injecting his subjects with deadly diseases under the guise of vaccines so that he could watch and study the effects if left untreated, leaving his victims suffering horrifying symptoms and eventually letting them die. But that was only the tip of the iceberg. Victims of his evil experiments would also have limbs amputated and reattached to other parts of their bodies while conscious and without the use of any anesthesia, or be put into pressure chambers until their eyes literally escaped their skull. It's estimated that nearly 10,000 people died at the hands of Shiro Ishii's cruel experiments. But perhaps most insane of all is that after the war ended, he was never charged with any war crimes, as he traded the information obtained from his experiments for immunity and lived out the remainder of his life in Japan a free man.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have the earthquake detector. In 132 AD, a man named Zhang Hen was able to create the first earthquake detector called the seismoscope. Far ahead of its time, this creation was incredibly accurate and is actually comparable in efficiency to those that we use now. Apparently, in 138, this tool detected an earthquake that was a ways away, and at the time nobody believed it and dismissed the warning. A few days later, a messenger arrived and asked for help, which confirmed that this thing really did accurately detect an earthquake and where it was coming from. Researchers still aren't sure exactly how it works, which is so crazy, but I guess some things are just meant to be a mystery. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Gangkar Puensum. This mountain is the largest mountain that has been unclimbed by humans and stands at a height of 7,570 meters or 24,836 feet. Studies and measurements of this mountain started 100 years ago in 1922, but it wasn't until much more recently that we began to acquire actually accurate details about it. The name of the mountain means White Peak of the Three Spiritual Brothers, which becomes an important part of why this mountain remains unclimbed. In 1983, the mountain became open for mountaineering, but between 1985 and 1986, there were 4 separate expeditions who tried to summit it and failed. Part of the reason why these expeditions failed were because there were disputes on the location and there was just inaccurate information, so the first group who tried to summit it couldn't even find the mountain at all. In 1994, the climbing of mountains in Bhutan higher than 6,000 meters became prohibited due to spiritual beliefs, and in 2003, mountaineering became prohibited entirely. This is why the mountain remains unsummited, and while I'm sure it would be an amazing expedition for climbers, who knows what is going on up there in terms of ecology due to it being left alone. In our number 8 spot today, we have the ancient seabed. A seabed that was once located at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean was found buried hundreds of miles beneath China. This slab of rock once found its home at the top of the lithosphere, which is the outermost layer of the Earth. How did it get hundreds of miles below China? Well, it got pushed down by a neighboring tectonic plate in what is called a subduction event. This discovery was so notable because scientists had never detected a subduction event so deep within the surface of the planet. When they found this rock slab, it was still continuing its descent towards the mantle of the Earth. I wonder if one day it will come back to the surface again. In our number 7 spot today, we have a gibbon skull. Gibbons are a type of ape that are often characterized by their swinging ability coupled with their loud, bright calls, and the 8th century Chinese poet Li Bai described their voices as they swung past the Yangtze River. But here's the thing. Today, there are no gibbons that live anywhere near the river. Also, the gibbons that exist now have different fur patterns from the ones that are often depicted in classical Chinese paintings. This has led experts to believe that there must have been another kind of gibbon that has now vanished, and physical evidence of this gibbon might have turned up in the most unexpected place: a tomb. This tomb, which was built for the grandmother of the first emperor of China nearly 2,300 years ago, contained a skull and a jawbone so distinct that scientists believed they must have belonged to a member of this now extinct gibbon genus. Many surviving gibbon species are now facing extinction, so it is likely that there were others in the past who unfortunately faced the same kind of fate. In our number 6 spot today, we have the green gel. This is a discovery that was made by the U-22 rover, which is currently exploring our wonderful moon. On Lunar Day 8 last year, which began on July 25th, the rover was doing its thing, finding its way through an area that was filled with a bunch of small impact craters. On July 28th, as the team here on Earth was preparing to power down the rover for its little midday nap, which is meant to protect the machine from high temperatures and radiation from the sun, one member of the team was checking over some images that were taken by the rover's main camera, and they spotted a small crater that seemed like it contained some sort of material that had a color and a sort of luster that was significantly different from the lunar area surrounding it. The team then changed the plans they had for the rover and decided that instead of going west, which was next on the schedule, they would instead take a little detour to check out this mystery material. The rover carefully made its way over to the crater and examined it with both its visible and near-infrared spectrometer, which is a thing that detects lights that are scattered or reflected off of a material, which helps to reveal what they're made up of. For a while, no one knew exactly what the substance was, and it was only being described as being gel-like and being a weird color, but after almost a year of more research, it was finally identified. It's rock. More specifically, rock that was melted together, most likely in the heat of impact from a meteorite. It's insane that something like that created a dark green, glistening impact melt, but it's also very cool. I'm just glad that this is one mystery that we got to the bottom of. In our number 5 spot today, we have the Gobi Desert structure. This is one discovery that had conspiracy theorists' minds absolutely swirling. About a decade ago, someone was searching through some Google Maps images when they found a mysterious array of structures and patterns that appeared to be etched into the surface of the Gobi Desert, which is, of course, located in China. The structures are reminiscent of geoliths, but they are seemingly much more modern and newly created. The speculation of what this structure could be or why it was created went wild, with people saying that they were street maps of American cities or messages either to or from some sort of extraterrestrials. The list of bizarre theories just goes on. While this is still sort of conspiracy sounding, this is likely the most reasonable explanation for what these structures are, and that is that these structures are used to help calibrate China's spy and radar satellites. To be fair, this does make a lot of sense, and I don't have any other ideas on what it could be for, so. In our number 4 spot today, we have the droughts. Ancient drawings and writings were found covering the walls of the Dayu Cave, which is located in central China, and a lot of them detail different droughts and such that were experienced during their time of their writing. According to these drawings, people would come to the cave for either water or to pray for rain in times of drought. The writings reveal some of the horrors that the people of the time experienced while going through these periods of drought, including severe starvation, social instability, and conflict between government and citizens. While these cave writings show us a difficult time in history, researchers say that the stalagmites that were also found in the cave might show a grim prediction for the future. Since these are formed by dripping water and they form sort of rings, like how trees do, and these rings can give us insights into different things. Based on the patterns of these rings, scientists were able to corroborate the things that the cave writings were saying, but they were also able to make a grim prediction for the future, which is that unfortunately the region may again see one of these catastrophic droughts whereabouts, this time in the late 2030s. In our number 3 spot today we have the ruins. Taking over our number 3 spot today we have the most recent discovery on this list. While archaeologists were digging at one of the most important archaeological sites in China just earlier this year, they found a bronze altar as well as a dragon with a pig's nose, among many other things in a couple of the sacrificial pits that are seen at this site. In fact, they said the findings were made in sacrificial pits 7 and 8, to which I have to ask, how many are there? Another highlight of the new finds was a bronze box with a tortoise-shaped lid. Inside, this box contained jade artifacts, and even traces of silk fabric were found around it. These finds are so astonishing because every little piece gives us so much insight into the buried secrets of the ancient Chinese civilization. In our number 2 spot today we have an ancient mystery. While excavating a tomb in China, the team discovered the skeleton of a young man that was riddled with wounds, giving clues as to how he died. The man is estimated to have been about 25 years old at the time of his death, and it is thought that he was harmed and then thrown into the tomb raider's shaft while still alive, which is absolutely gruesome. It is believed that this crime took place between 640 and 680 AD. It appears as though he wasn't a thief because the shaft had begun to be refilled with soil by the time of his death, so we really aren't sure why this young man met this cruel fate. As a true crime enthusiast myself, this is absolutely fascinating, and I wish we could find some answers to bring this guy's story full circle, but sometimes these things are just destined to stay a secret. In our number 1 spot today we have the palace. Archaeologists and researchers were certainly baffled a few years ago when they were digging beneath the foundation of the Lifeng Pagoda, which sits on Lifeng Mountain. Well, digging isn't exactly the right word. To be honest, there was a huge stone or boulder that weighed over 1,500 pounds that was lifted away, which then revealed a stone tablet. Once this tablet was lifted, it revealed a huge underground palace. Inside this palace, researchers found many hidden treasures that included a Buddhist statue, bronze mirrors, coins, and there was also a rusty iron case that was found during the initial discovery, which researchers believe held many relics. The pagoda that sat on top of this hidden palace was first completed in 976 AD, so it is thought that this area remained untouched from at least then until its modern discovery.
First up in our number 10 spot are zombie stars. Back in 2014, NASA announced it had discovered a star system that had been the victim of a fairly weak supernova explosion they referred to as SN2012Z. Now, boring scientific name aside, normally when a star supernovas, that's kind of it. But in the case of the zombie stars, scientists found that a part of the system's dwarf star may have somehow survived, kind of like the undead. And while they haven't officially confirmed anything just yet, that only makes it all the more suspicious. However, that's not even the wildest part. Apparently, another reason they're called zombie stars is that they scream as they eat other stars. As NASA explained, several seemingly dead stars are emitting high energy X-rays that could well be their howls or screams, which is just about the weirdest and scariest thing I have ever learned about. Moving on to number 9, the faces of Mars. There are many things I could guess you might find in space. Space junk, satellites, maybe even an alien if you're lucky, but the last thing I would probably guess would be a human face on the surface of the red planet. Well, back in 1976, while circling Mars in search of landing sites for its sister ship, the Viking 1 snapped a few photos that were intended for NASA engineers to study. Now, the strange thing about this photo is obvious. It appears as though there is a human face-shaped object on the surface of another planet, which, I mean, just brings up so many questions. Now, as far as NASA has officially announced, it's nothing too exciting, just merely a huge rock formation which resembles a human head formed by shadows, giving the illusion of eyes, nose, and mouth. However, this hasn't deterred conspiracy theorists from getting their 2 cents in, and some believe that it could all be a cover-up for some kind of alien life on Mars. More specifically, the theory states that the face is the remnant of an alien civilization, while also suggesting that other rocky formations in the area could be a crumbling extraterrestrial city, almost like some kind of alien Atlantis, which not only would make a very cool sci-fi movie, but would be a mind-blowing cover-up if it turned out to be true. Coming in at number 8,
Space snakes. It's one thing when there's an alleged alien sighting from your neighbor down the street, but it really feels a lot more intense when the creature in question was actually spotted by an astronaut while in space. The astronaut in question is Dr. Story Musgraves, who is not only a decorated former astronaut, but also a physician and consultant. And according to him, he witnessed a strange creature on 2 separate occasions while in space. Quote, "On 2 of my missions, and I still don't have an answer, I have seen a snake out there, 6, 7, 8 feet long. It is rubbery because it has internal waves in it, and it follows you for a rather long period of time. The more you fly in space, the more you see an incredible amount of things out there. And that sort of brings to you really a certainty that other living creatures are out there." Now, of course, many were skeptical of his space snake sighting, and theories like it being a hose or a piece of space debris have been used to discredit him, but Musgraves has never once wavered and insists on what he saw. Quote, "Other living creatures are out there, and other civilizations that have been around for a million years that are doing unimaginable kinds of things." Coming in at number 7, wow signal. Back in 1977, astronomer Jerry Eman was researching at the Ohio State University when an incredible and unexplainable radio signal was detected using the school's Big Ear telescope. In those days, information was run through what was called an IBM 1130 mainframe computer before being printed on paper and then studied by hand. Upon reviewing the findings, Jerry came across something he had never seen before. There, in a vertical column, was the sequence 6EQUJ5. Jerry was flabbergasted and immediately circled the sequence and wrote "wow" right beside it, hence the name. The signal they picked up had come from nearly 220 million light years away, and there was no explanation as to how or why a radio signal could be detected from that distance. It immediately became a sensation in both the science community and the rest of the world, and was used to support the search for alien life in the universe. Jerry himself says he's convinced that it certainly has the potential to be the first signal from extraterrestrial intelligence, but despite best efforts, no such signal has ever been seen since, which only makes it all the more intriguing. Next up at number 6, alien cover-up. Back in April of 1979, Viktor Afanasyev lifted off and began making his way to the Salyut 6 space station. However, while he was making his way there, he claims to have witnessed a very strange sight. Quote, "It followed us during half of our orbit. We observed it on the light side, and when we entered to the shadow side, it disappeared completely. It was an engineering structure made from some type of metal, approximately 40 meters long with inner hulls. The object was narrow here and wider here, and inside there were openings. Some places had projections like small wings. The object stayed very close to us. We photographed it, and our photos showed it to be 23 to 28 meters away." Now that in and of itself is a little suspicious. Victor also claims to have continually reported back to mission control about its size, shape, and position. But when the cosmonaut returned to Earth, he was allegedly debriefed and ordered not to talk to anyone about it ever. And to make matters even stranger, he claims his cameras were confiscated and his photos and his voice transmissions from space have never been released. I mean, that definitely sounds like someone is hiding something if you ask me. Moving on to number 5. Eridanus supervoid. The Eridanus supervoid is an extremely large and eternally empty chunk of, well, space that, from what scientists can tell, is around 1 billion light years in diameter. For reference, 1 light year is supposed to be about 9 trillion kilometers or 6 trillion miles. So times 9 trillion by 1 billion, and that's how big this giant supervoid is. Now, as far as astronomical standards go, that's a hefty size. And this supervoid is so large that so far it can't be explained by the current theories of the universe, which is pretty unnerving in a few ways. The most straightforward theory about the supervoid suggests the existence of an insanely massive black hole that would have the power to suck in stars, planets, light, and dark matter, among other space stuff, and that with each inhale of the universe, it will get stronger and stronger, all all of which sounds horrifying. But that's not the only theory. Some researchers propose the void is actually evidence of a parallel universe, maybe even one being controlled by a horde of ruthless aliens? Of course, the second theory requires some more concrete evidence, but either way, this super void still seems pretty freaky. Moving on to number 4, the end of the universe. It's no secret that eventually, billions of years from now, the sun will expand into a red giant and kill the Earth. But what is a little more up for debate is how the entire universe itself will die. According to the BBC, some scientists feel the universe will perish via heat death, which suggests that heat itself will die and the entire universe will freeze just a tick above absolute zero. Another theory, called the Big Crunch theory, which is almost the exact opposite of the Big Bang, suggests that the universe will continue expanding until that's all it can expand, and when it can expand no more, everything will contract and collapse into itself. Then there is the Big Change theory, where bubbles of dark energy consume our universe, rendering everything inhospitable to the point where even atoms might not form anymore. And finally, the Big Rip theory, where dark energy would expand, become more massive, and just tear galaxies to pieces. Now, these are all just theories, of course, but each one sounds as terrifying as the last. At least it won't be happening for a very long time. Coming in at number 3, a scary supernova. To break it down, supernovas are pretty much giant star explosions, and they aren't uncommon, so it's not usually something that would seem too scary. But apparently, the ASA SSN-15LH was a supernova unlike any other. For starters, it was a superluminous supernova, observed in June of 2015, that originated 2.8 billion light years away, which would mean that it actually exploded 2.8 billion years ago. But what makes it special, or scary, I guess, is that scientists can't explain it. Unlike a regular supernova, this one was 10 times brighter and considerably more powerful. Also, when astronomers analyzed the light it was emitting, they couldn't find evidence of the hydrogen that should have been present. The initial explanation for the massive supernova involved what's called a magnetar, which is kind of a magnetic neutron star, and the theory was that the powerful magnetic field it provides could have added extra energy to the expanding ball of superheated gas. But then they realized that this scary star emitted more energy than a magnetar would have been able to provide. And apparently, even months after the boom, it was still giving off more energy than the entire Milky Way. Honestly, the more they try to figure out, the more confusing it seems to be. And if some of the smartest people in the world can't figure out what's going on, well, that's pretty scary. Moving on to number 2, the Great Attractor. As if giant exploding stars and potential alien life forms were not enough to get you freaked out, there is also a phenomenon happening in the galaxy that is essentially the universe equivalent of being dragged toward an inescapable doom. Essentially, what's happening is that the Milky Way, its companion galaxies, and various other galactic stuff are all moving toward an area of space at a speed of 2.2 million kilometers per hour. Now, to ease you a bit, while that is very fast for us, it's apparently slower in space terms, but we still don't really know what is dragging all the matter in that direction. According to scientists, the speed at which we are moving implies an area of space creating a massive gravitational force, roughly equivalent to 10,000 galaxies. And since it is sucking in everything within a considerable distance, this mysterious region has been dubbed the Great Attractor. However, we can't actually see it, so we're kind of being dragged blindly. The reason being is that the Great Attractor sits in a region of space referred to by astronomers as the zone of avoidance. And it's called that because it sits exactly on the other side of the densest part of the Milky Way, thus observing it through all those stars and massive clouds of space dust is nearly impossible. How fun, right? And last up in our number 1 spot, GRB. Short for gamma ray bursts, GRBs are basically giant, super long explosions of energy. Now, the good news is that none have ever been observed in our own galaxy, and they apparently don't happen all too often in other galaxies. But that also means scientists don't know as much about them as they would like to. As NASA explains, GRBs might be caused by low energy gamma rays that once exposed to space explode into high energy rays, but that is just one of the ongoing theories at this point. But the terrifying reality of GRBs doesn't end at a lack of complete understanding. A 2014 study showed frequent GRB explosions have left swaths of the universe completely inhospitable. That study also said there's a good chance a GRB was the cause of at least one mass extinction event in Earth's history. Meaning that if a GRB ever landed in our galaxy, the human race could, in theory, be completely wiped out.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have the James Webb Telescope. Christmas definitely came on December 25th this year, especially for those of you out there who are space enthusiasts, and you know that's because the launch of the James Webb Telescope finally happened on Christmas Day itself. If you don't know, the James Webb Telescope is the largest and most powerful telescope ever developed, with its creation beginning back in 1996. The telescope was created with help from NASA, the Canadian Space Agency, and the European Space Agency, and it cost around $500 million to make. The launch of the telescope has been long awaited, as it was delayed more times than Cyberpunk. Other than the fact that we all had to wait with bated breath, the reason this launch is so exciting is because for the next several decades, this telescope will show us parts of the universe that were previously unseeable to us. We'll get a closer look at and a chance to explore other planets, we'll see the birth of stars, and it might even give us a peek into how the very first galaxies were formed. Basically, this thing might show us more about the universe than we've ever had access to before. It is truly magnificent. Right now, the telescope is passing through its most crucial phase, which is the unfurling of the sun protective shield, and if all goes well, which it seems to be thanks to the ground team working on it every step of the way, we are very close to seeing some of the most amazing space discoveries in human history. In our number 9 spot today, we have the malaria vaccine. In October of last year, the World Health Organization made an important announcement when they approved the world's very first malaria vaccine for kids. There's a couple reasons why this deserved a spot on today's list. The first one being because it is the first vaccine against any parasitic disease, which is a step forward for the world of medicine. But more importantly, this vaccine is crucial because malaria is still one of the most dangerous diseases on the entire planet, and it's one that takes the lives of over 500,000 people annually. The new vaccine cost over $750 million to make, and it began being created and tested all the way back in 1987, so it certainly was not an easy road by any means. This new vaccine is meant to fight against the deadliest of the 5 malaria pathogens, and the medicine is given through 4 different injections. Right now, it is estimated that this shot could prevent about 5.3 million malaria cases every single year. In our number 8 spot today, we have Mars. February of 2021 was a big month for Mars, which is hilarious to say, but also very true. In that time, there were 3 different missions that arrived to the Red Planet, and this wasn't really a coincidence. It was just a few different space agencies taking advantage of the Earth-Mars orbit alignment, which only happens once every 26 months. First, the UAE's Hope orbiter reached the planet, which is aimed to study the past, present, and future of the Mars climate by orbiting the planet. This will hopefully show us any patterns or changes on Mars, whether they're daily, monthly, or yearly. Then, the CNSA Tianwen-1 began surveying the surface of the planet from orbit before the Zhurong rover touched down on the planet to actually move around the surface. And then finally, we have the Perseverance rover from NASA, which will spend the next few years digging into the soil and rock to collect samples of the planet for us to study. With all of these Mars visits, one of the most important things we learned, or really tested, is how we can fly through the brutal and harsh Martian atmosphere. Basically, the Ingenuity helicopter that came on the mission with Perseverance helps by scouting out the area ahead to highlight any potential hazards or objects that might be of interest. I had to include this quote from an article on indiatoday.in where I found some of this information because it really sums up this whole point so beautifully. They wrote, quote, "This year on Mars, the UAE learned how to orbit, China learned how to land, and NASA learned how to fly." In our number 7 spot today, we have animal evolution. It isn't necessarily surprising for me to say that humans are having an impact on animal evolution. That much is kind of to be expected, especially since we tend to treat the Earth like we're the only ones who live on it. But 2021 showed us some pretty clear examples of just how we are affecting this change. Studies have now shown a sharp rise in the populations of African elephants without tusks. Why?
Well, because of poaching, of course. Poachers killed so many elephants with tusks, especially during the Mozambican Civil War from 1977 to 1992, which left the females without tusks more likely to pass on their genes. Another more indirect way that humans are impacting animal evolution is with the changes that we are experiencing in the climate. A study from Trends in Ecology and Evolution has shown that bats are growing to have bigger wings and rabbits are growing to have longer ears, and these are both likely to dissipate more heat into the surrounding area and cool them down. A study in Science Advances suggested that 77 species of birds found in a remote patch of the Amazon rainforest were found to weigh less and have longer wings, most likely as a result of rising temperatures as well as the changes in the rainfall pattern. In our number 6 spot today, we have the early humans. This scientific breakthrough involves one of the earliest human species, Neanderthals. Some very cool paleontologists from Madrid created a 3D model of the ear structure of Neanderthals. That alone is just an unbelievable sentence. Scientists in 2021 recreated the ear structures of an early human species that lived 130,000 to 40,000 years ago. And that's not even the wild, crazy discovery. I love science. So, they created these 3D models, and it made them then realize that Neanderthals may have had the ability to speak and hear just like Homo sapiens, which is of course the modern human species. Every year we uncover more and more data and material that challenges what we once thought we knew about the early humans. It is so fascinating and interesting to watch it all unfold. In our number 5 spot today, we have Early Humans Part 2. Remember when I just said 2 seconds ago that every year we learn more that changes what we once believed about the early humans and the history of humans? Well, here's another one. In September of 2021, a study dated footprints that were found in the White Sands National Park, and they were said to be from 21,000 to 23,000 years old. For those of you sitting there being like, well, how could they possibly know how old footprints are? These prints, referred to as the ghost prints, were dated by using radiocarbon dating of the dried ditchgrass seeds that were found both above and below the footprints. The reason why this dating was important is because prior to this, many archaeologists placed the start of human life in the Americas at around 13,000 years ago, at the end of the last ice age, and this was based on tools that were found in New Mexico. The paper that published this information, which, just for transparency, has been debated by some, suggests that humans actually lived on the continent during the ice age, which of course changes a lot. A month after this find, there was a study published in Nature that showed evidence of Vikings living in North America earlier than what was once thought. The researchers got to this conclusion by examining cut wood and finding samples of a cosmic ray event that happened in 993 CE. This is definitely a couple of discoveries that are still unfolding and being examined and looked into further, but it's all very interesting. In our number 4 spot today, we have quantum computing. Okay, I'm not gonna lie, this is a discovery that I know very little about, if I even know anything on the topic at all, so bear with me as I try to do my best to explain. To my understanding, quantum computers do in seconds what the best supercomputers would take days or weeks to complete and process. These quantum computers use the laws of quantum physics, which is the thing I know nothing about, to get these incredible processing capabilities, which completely changes the game for a multitude of things like meteorology, cybersecurity, national defense, the list just goes on. Okay, so how does this relate to a 2021 moment? Well, in November of last year, IBM launched the 127 Qubit Eagle, which is the most powerful quantum processor ever. Then a company called Quantinum launched a cloud-based cybersecurity platform called Quantum Origin. Meanwhile, I'm in 2022 still trying to figure out what the cloud is. This is said to set the stage for quantum computing to start rapidly evolving, so I guess I'm gonna need to catch up. In our number 3 spot today, we have Heart of Titanium. With the understanding that heart disease takes an estimated 17.9 million lives around the world every year, it makes a lot of sense that for over 50 years, doctors have been trying to find a way to build an artificial heart, and 2021 saw us getting the closest we've ever been. An Australian research team called Bivacor built a titanium heart that uses something called spinning disk technology. Basically, it of course doesn't operate like a normal human heart, but instead it tries to one-up and improve the regular old evolution-perfected human heart and give it an even better way to pump blood around the body. It has a circular pump that is suspended between two magnets that lives inside of this titanium heart. Right now, there has yet to be a full human trial, which makes sense. These things take a lot of time, and it's certainly better not to rush them. The promising news, though, is that the artificial heart has been successful so far in both scenarios in animal trials, as well as with one used temporarily on heart transplant patients. In our number 2 spot today, we have coral reefs. Whether you believe in climate change or not, we can all agree that in the last few decades or so, we've seen a lot of natural disasters. From forest fires to droughts and heat waves. Maybe this is a result of climate change, maybe this is just how things go. I'm not here to argue with you, I'm just here to tell you about how this uptick in natural disasters affects our planet. More specifically, our coral reefs. These kinds of disasters and just the general climate of the Earth has an impact on the temperature of the oceans. This change in temperature has caused the reefs, which we forget are living things, to cast out this kind of symbiotic algae that helps them survive, which is then causing the reefs to bleach and then die. In 2021, a huge report was published from the Global Coral Reef Monitoring Network that showed that the oceans had lost about 14% of their reefs in the last decade. Then another study was later published that showed that there was less than 2% of the Great Barrier Reef that was able to escape bleaching since 1998. And this was all published just months after a different study that suggested that half of all coral reefs have been lost since the 1950s. Unfortunately, our coral reefs are in a lot of danger right now, and it affects more than just the ecology of the ocean. It will also impact us as humans. It impacts fisheries, tourism, coastal developments. I'm not saying that all of these are good reasons to care, but if they're the ones that get someone interested, then I guess it's something worth mentioning. In our number 1 spot today, we have the fireball. On February 28th, 2021, reports came pouring in from across the UK of an unusual streak of light that was seen in the sky. These reports were far behind the UK's Fireball Alliance, though, as their cameras had already picked up the signal and they were already in the midst of estimating its landing site. That's right, this streak of light was a meteor. It's a remnant of our early solar system that has been flying through space at unbelievable speeds until it came down through our atmosphere and ended its long, awesome journey scattered in a bunch of pieces across rural Gloucestershire. Teams were sent out to be responsible for the recovery of the extraterrestrial material, which was found in a family's driveway as well as in a sheep's field nearby. This meteorite is a rare specimen known as primitive carbonaceous chondrite, which is said to contain materials that have been essentially unaltered since the formation of the solar system 4.5 billion years ago. The pieces of this meteorite can give us insights into the building blocks of the planets, and it can potentially give us clues as to how the Earth came to be this wonderful planet that possesses all of the resources necessary to sustain human life.